Let me introduce you to Susan Bonsall. Susan Bonsall is a Larimer County Master Gardener. She has been in our program for many, many years, and Susan is an incredible wealth of information surrounding many different horticultural topics. She readily agreed to do this presentation simply because she wanted to learn more about poinsettias and amaryllis and all of those great flowers that we enjoy in our homes during the winter months. So Susan, thank you so much for doing this presentation, and you can take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Allison. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all of you taking your time this afternoon to learn about holiday plants. I suspect many of you are master gardeners or gardeners, if not master gardeners, in your state or in the counties in which you live. And gosh, don't you know, but the garden seasoning's over outside, even though it's 62 degrees today. The days are shorter, the nights are longer. We can't go outdoors and garden. So my idea, and I think Allison's idea actually, is to bring a bright spot of color into our homes and a bit of nature into our homes that we can enjoy during the holiday. And some plants actually have become very traditional holiday plants. And let me just see how to move this. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to do it a little bit differently. There we go. Here's four very popular holiday plants: the poinsettia, the Christmas cactus, the amaryllis, and the paperwhite. I just realized I'm going to have to use a different system to move things forward, so I have to change my modality here. So for each of these, what I'd like to do today to consider with you is the origin of the plant. Where do these plants come from anyhow? How did they get here? And how did they become holiday plants? I want to talk about the descriptors: what colors, what size, what the flowers are like, what the leaves are like, and how to select them. If you're going to go out and get a plant, how to get a nice healthy plant or nice healthy bulb in the with regard to amaryllis and paperwhites. And then how to plant those bulbs if you're thinking about doing that for those two winter holiday plants. Then how do we take care of them? What kind of soil do they need? Water, light, temperature, fertilizer. And here's the question that many people say: what do I do with this plant after the holiday season is over? And I think that's a great question. Some people want to go on to reblooming, other people not at all. So I'd like to begin with the poinsettia. This is what I think is the quintessential holiday plant. It has been for me. I grew up with poinsettias in my home. So according to the United States Department of Agriculture, poinsettias are the second largest selling potted plant in the country. Now, when you think they only come out basically around holiday time and there's still the second largest potted plant being sold, that says a lot about how much people really want these in their homes. And oh, you might ask me the question, what's the first largest seller? It's orchids, which are sold all year long. So poinsettias were cultivated by the Aztecs way back along the way, way before Europeans even got to that area. But in 1825, a botanist named Joel Poinsett, now here you get the connection between poinsettias and Poinsett, he brought the plant back, and it was actually very enthusiastically received. And then the horse race took off. There were intensive breeding programs to develop a sturdy, long-lasting plant. It was accompanied by a massive marketing program. It was even featured on the Tonight Show on TV, Bob Hope specials, such that it did become the traditional holiday plant. It's also called the Christmas flower, the Christmas star, or the Mexican flame leaf. And there's many, many different colors. I'm sure you've seen the red is the most popular. White is second in line on that one. But you have seen many different colors, including burgundy, pink, yellow. You could see a lime green one there. That variety is actually called Envy. But in nature, in all the breeding programs, they have not yet bred a true blue plant. So you haven't seen that. If you do see one, it's painted or sprayed or something of that nature. Now, these do grow in Mexico 10 to 15 feet. They're perennials. And we here find them in pots ranging from 5 inches to 2 feet. But I'll tell you, I was in a store the other day, and I have to say, I think that poinsettia was 3 feet tall. It was a real showstopper. So what is a poinsettia all about? Well, lots and lots of people think that those brightly colored, well, they're bracts. They're called bracts. People call them flowers. They're not. They're the bracts. What it is, a bract is a modified leaf. And they function to attract pollinators to the actually very small, inconspicuous flower that's at the center of the bract. You can see that on both of these pictures. If you look at a bract and you look at a leaf, which you can also see on both of these pictures, they're very similar in structure. So actually the colored parts of poinsettia are actually leaves called bracts that have been modified to be that color. So how does this happen? I think that's a good question. Poinsettias are photoperiodic. They like short days and they need long periods of dark. So they're short day, long night plants. And it's the reduction in light that prevents the plant from producing chlorophyll, which then in the breeding allows the bracts to turn red, pink, white, etc. Fortunately, we don't need to do this ourselves. It comes out of the greenhouse already changed. So unless you're planning to try again next year, once you use this year's plant, and try again next year, we don't need to do it. But here's how it's done. The greenhouses create a light-dark cycle. They pull light excluding fabric over the nursery benches each afternoon and to get that required period of darkness. And I'll be talking about this. I'm going to talk about reblooming. And they maintain their main greenhouses at 62 degrees. So that's how it happens. And thank goodness they do that because we get beautiful plants. So if you're going out to select your plant, or if you haven't already, here's a chance to do it. You want a plant that has healthy, dark green foliage. Now, I will say the plants with lighter colored, like white or mottled bracts, they'll typically have a lighter green foliage themselves, but you don't want pale green, you don't want yellow or fallen leaves. Obviously, you're not going to buy a wilted plant. You can put your finger down in the pot and see if it's watered or absolutely dried out. The bracts should be well developed, needless to say, and the flowers should have rounded buds and no powdered yellow pollen. That's indicating some age there. You don't want any roots coming out of the bottom of the pot. And the reason for that is they come in these foil. Most of them come in foil wrapped around them. You can slip that foil away and you can see if there's roots coming out the bottom. That just indicates that the plant is older than not. So you don't want those roots coming out of the bottom of the pot because you're going to be keeping this plant, well, we'll see, we have to vote, keep this plant longer than just the holiday season. When you buy your plant and you're about to take it home, and I'm sure you've heard this will not be a surprise, you need to protect it. You need to wrap it well. Often it comes in a sleeve. If it doesn't come in a sleeve, and let's say you're buying at a grocery store, take one of the plastic bags up over the bottom, up over the top, fasten it in the middle to protect it from the cool temperatures and from the wind. Because low temps, even temporary ones between the store and your car, can damage the leaves and can damage the bracts, and you don't want that. It would be nice if you had an accomplice. Sounds like we're on a bank robbery or something, but we're not. If you have an accomplice who stays in the car while you get your poinsettia, that person can keep the car warm. So when you come in, the car will be warm, because cold car will possibly injure or possibly even kill a plant. If you're going to do other errands, drop your plant off at home before you run around doing other things. And then once inside your home, remove the sleeve, remove the covering promptly. You don't want the leaf stalks to be bent downwards. So here you are at home. What does the poinsettia want? Well, you want it in a well-lit location, but out of direct sunlight. So you can have an east, south, a west window. It certainly provide enough light, but you want to get it out of direct sun because that will fade the bracts, and you're trying to keep the bracts colorful for a period of time. Temperatures, well, these poinsettias like to be at the same room temperature that we live, probably from 67 to 70 in the day and 60, 62 at night. Again, you don't want to take the temperature too low at night, below 50 degrees. And you want to avoid drafts. Don't put yours near a door or a window that for some reason gets opened, or heat sources like radiators, heat ducts, high traffic areas, doorways, fireplaces, wood burning stoves. So it's not that they're totally finicky, but why not put it in the best spot possible that's going to make it happy to be living in your home? Now, water is one of the biggest factors in overall plant health, as those of you who have plants, houseplants know, and it's true for poinsettias as well. They like a moderately moist soil. Remember that your heating system will make your house drier, and so they might need a little bit more water, so you want to check daily. Plants that come in clay pots, clay wick away moisture more quickly, so they might dry out more quickly. And those in plastic pots, well, obviously they can be overwatered. And again, that bright foil, if it's around the plant, you can remove the foil to water or poke holes in the bottom. And then let the water run through, drain, let it drain. You're going to hear me use the word drain quite a bit in this conversation. Don't let the pot sit in standing water. You don't want to have the roots be continuously wet, wet, wet. And you want to discard any water collected in the drainage receptacle. So if those roots get really wet, you might hurt them, and no root, no plant. Pretty simple. And you don't need a fertilizer. You don't need any fertilizer while the plant is in bloom. Now, here's the big question. Once the holidays are over, we put away our decorations, but we can't put away a fresh plant. However, what people do is they wait until the bracts fade or drop, and then they throw the plant away. Perfectly acceptable if that's what they'd like to do. Other folks would prefer to keep the plant, so they clip off the bracts and keep it for the green foliage. So that's the option I'd like to consider with you, and I'd also like to consider reblooming for the next holiday. So the bracts begin to fade around March or April, and this is your signal to engage in the next phase of poinsettia care. You want to remove the bracts, they're falling, remove them, they're fading, they're dropping. You want to remove them, and you want to remove part of the stem. You notice that the plant, will look rather bare. You have 3 or 4 leaves on each of the stems, but the pruning is really essential at this point to allow new growth to emerge from the nodes on the stem. So the suggestion is to prune at 6-week intervals to keep the plant well formed. So by mid-August, you should do your last pruning, early September, maybe, okay? But also in March or April, this is a time you could repot the poinsettia. You want to move the plant to the next larger size using a well-draining potting medium of your choice. And you can fertilize at this point with a well-balanced, slow-release fertilizer as you go around irrigating your plants. Now, the goal here is to keep the poinsettia growing. So after that initial pruning and repotting, you can keep it in bright light indoors, but you can also take the plant outside after the danger of frost is past. Well, here in Colorado, the date that is set out for that is May 15th. Personally, I wouldn't put it out until Memorial Day, because it's Colorado, you don't know, but keep an eye on the weather. You could put it outside. First, you could put it in filtered light, and again, you're watering, you're fertilizing, and then moving it into a sunny spot as midsummer comes along. But you're going to continue to prune the 6-week intervals. You know, the new growth is another 4 to 5 inches. You could prune it back, prune another 2 to 3 inches, prune it back. So one way to remember this, and I thank Allison for this, thank you very much, is you can tag your pruning with holidays. So if you begin your pruning in mid-April, approximately 6 weeks later is Memorial Day. And that's when you might be taking your plant outside anyhow, so you could prune. After that comes 4th of July. Well, that's not exactly 6 weeks, but you can fudge. And then you're just going to have to remember mid-August, late August for the last pruning. But again, watch the temps, be clear to watch the nighttime temperatures. If they're getting down to 60 degrees, bring the plant indoors to somewhere, a spot that has 6 hours of direct sun. And this is where you begin to reduce your fertilizer. So the plant does require certain things in order to rebloom, certain protocol. Remember, these poinsettias are short day, long night, photoperiodic plants. So you've brought it in, let's say Labor Day. And between Labor Day and October 1st, you have it in the bright sun and you're watering. On October 1st, it needs to move into an alternate light dark situation. 8 hours of bright sun and then 16 hours of uninterrupted, and I focus on the uninterrupted darkness each night. Oh, well, how do you do that? Well, you could put a wastebasket over the plant, an opaque box. You could put it in a closet that frankly doesn't get opened. It cannot be opened in that 14 to 16 hour period. And you could set up a schedule for yourself: out into the light at 8 a.m., into the dark at 4 p.m. Now, what happens is any stray light of any kind can delay, it halts the reflowering process. That's common, and that's light pollution during the darkness period. Once bracts start to turn color on the top branches, you can cease or stop that alternate back and forth light and dark and just keep it in a sunny area, in a sunny location. Excuse me. So I'm just going to reiterate this. You've brought it in on Labor Day, and then October 1st to about Thanksgiving. So that's October, September. Oh, excuse me. You do the light and dark. It depends when those bracts come into color as to when you bring it back out into the light. But then Thanksgiving to Christmas, it's in a sunny spot and you have a rebloomed, beautiful poinsettia. And different varieties of them will come into bloom at slightly different times, but hopefully you've done it in such a way that it's just in time for your new holiday season. Now I'm going to say one more thing. Poinsettias, it's a myth buster. They're not poisonous. They're not poisonous. There was research done at Ohio State University in 1971, and that's almost 50 years ago, where they did the research and blended up poinsettia parts, leaves, etc., fed them to rats. Turns out a 50-pound child, and that's a pretty big kid, would have to eat about 500 poinsettia leaves to really suffer. But as with all non-food items, they're not meant to be edible, not intended to be eaten. So what's interesting is the plant is closely related genetically to the rubber plant. And that's where natural latex is derived. I want to know how many of you actually remember our rubber tires on our cars were derived from rubber tree plantations. Hey, I think that's so cool. But the latex is what we're concerned with here. People have an allergy to it, and it can create a sensitivity, irritation to the skin, to the eyes, to the mucous membranes, if ingested, to the digestive tract. So if for some reason they're eaten, a leaf or two is eaten, it may cause some varying degree of discomfort, but certainly not death. So I think it'd be sensible to keep plants out of reach of children and animals at this point. So that's the poinsettia, my quintessential holiday plant, which I think is, well, it's almost a must. I did go out and I bought one. Why not? And I'll have to see whether I follow my own directions about keeping it until next year. So I'd like to turn to the holiday cactus. And I say holiday cactus because in the advertisement for this, I think I used the word Christmas cactus. Well, as it turns out, there are 3 different kinds of cacti, and I will be talking about each one. But holiday cacti is what I'm going to use now. They're originally from the rainforest in coastal Brazil, and they're epiphytes. An epiphyte is a plant that grows in the rainforest, in the crooks of branches, on the branches, at the base of a tree, but they're not parasites. They're just close companions is what I'll call them. Ferns do this, air plants do this, orchids do this, growing on tree trunks in tropical rainforests. So that's what these cacti are. They would be very unhappy in our Southwest desert because they're actually from a rainforest. They do bloom yearly. They are long-lived. They're wonderful botanical heirloom plants. And the Christmas cactus itself comes from a hybrid that was developed in the 1840s in England. So there's other breeding programs now, as you know, with all things horticultural. There's all manner of wonderful ways to get different kinds of plants from the original plant. So here are the three different kinds, and I'm not sure, but I can imagine you've heard of each one. There's a Thanksgiving cactus, a Christmas cactus, and an Easter cactus. And the way we tell them apart is by their stem segments. These cacti don't have actual leaves, but they have stem segments, and they all look different, and all the flowers are different. And the reason they're named what they are is because each one of these blooms closest to the holiday, the name that's been given to them. So let's look at each one. Thanksgiving cactus, they have stem segments with pointed teeth, very obvious when you see these plants in a store. These are your Thanksgiving cacti. They have asymmetrical flowers that bend at the ovary and yellow anthers. And anthers, as you know, are part of the stamen that contains the pollen. Most commonly we see these before Christmas because they can be forced to bloom at this time. So when I was looking for pictures for this PowerPoint, I found lots of pictures that said Christmas cactus, Christmas cactus, Christmas cactus, and they were all truly Thanksgiving cacti. So it's kind of interesting. There is a bit of, it's not confusion, but it's easy to call these, even though they're Thanksgiving cacti, easy to call them Christmas. Now, Christmas cacti have segments with rounded teeth, not those pointy ones. They have asymmetrical flowers that bend at the ovary, that do not bend at the ovary, I'm sorry, and have purplish anthers. And these plants bloom around Christmas, not so much before Christmas, around Christmas and sometime thereafter. And since I said this was a conversation about Christmas cactus, here's a little bit more information. They grow long segmented petals that branch from a low-lying base stalk. They're softly rounded. They sprout from the segment behind it. And the look, well, they're kind of cool. They have these hanging looks, the scallop-shaped branches coming down over the pot. That's what your Christmas cactus will look like if indeed you end up getting one of those. So let's turn to the Easter cactus. It has stem segments that are rounded, scalloped edges, and bristle-like hairs at the bottom of the stem segment apex. The flowers are more symmetrical and they have golden yellow anthers. So let's go on with all three, calling them holiday cacti. The blooms range in color from white, pinky white, fuchsia with a white throat, fuchsia with a fuchsia throat, red, orangey red, apricot, and yellow. An interesting note here is that it has been observed if you get a white blooming cactus, it will bloom pinkish white if you keep it at a lower temperature. That's interesting. They seem to modify themselves. The Thanksgiving cacti have the greatest variation in color across the spectrum, and they bloom, as I said, from, well, Thanksgiving to Christmas. Christmas cacti flower in late December and to March, and they usually have red flowers, although you might, again, I'm finding these fuchsia ones, so you have to look, well, is that really a Thanksgiving cactus or a Christmas cactus? And the Easter cacti bloom, excuse me, from March through May, having pink or red flowers. And the flowers bloom on the outermost tip of each branch, and the petals grow out of each other. So once you get one at the store or garden center, wherever you're getting it, how do you want to take care of it? I think that's the interesting question. They prefer cooler temperatures. I had those poinsettias up around 65 to 70 degrees, and these are more 60 to 65 degrees in the daytime, and nighttime 55 to 60. Again, it's this thing where you want to avoid drafts, heaters, doorways, because what happens with these guys is the abrupt change in temperature will actually cause the blooms to drop or some buds to drop. So when you're taking it from the store to your car, if you can protect it, great. But even then you might get some bloom drop just because the abrupt change in temperature. Again, water is this critical thing. It's keeping the soil moist, but not saturating the soil or letting it dry out between waterings. It's interesting. The top inch could dry out. They don't mind that. You want to watch, and you're going to love this. You're going to watch for wrinkling or puckering along the flattened stems. This could indicate under or overwatering. So here's we are Goldilocks. Too much water, too little water. We want it to be just right. So you got, in a way, you have to get to know your plant, your holiday cactus, whatever it is, getting to know what makes it happiest. The plant can be kept drier in the fall. In fact, one of the secrets to having a very, very bright flower is to reduce the water after the buds have come on and the flowers are forming. If you reduce the water then, you'll have intensified color in the flowers. Fertilization, not so much during budding and blossoming. That can happen in the spring, summer, and fall, spring and summer, but not during this time. And if you do fertilize, you can use a standard indoor houseplant fertilizer, such as 15, 30, 15 NPK. That 30 will boost up the flowers a little bit, but you're not fertilizing during the flowering time. I just want to make clear on that. Now, these are plants, it's kind of interesting. They're short day, long night plants. They're photoperiodic sensitive. So if you want to get your plants to bloom at a certain time, you can actually do that. You can try that. They come to us already having that done. They're already flowering when we buy them, but they will respond with that to that same dark light situation. So I'm talking for, let's say you have one that's already blooming, you get it at the store. So I'm actually talking about next year in some ways. If you want it to respond to your timetable for the holidays, you want to do the light dark situation. Okay, the light for 8 hours, dark for 16 hours, light dark, doing that until you do that for about 6 to 8 weeks for a complete bud set. And then of course they're out into the sunlight, a sunny spot in your home. And you can do this regimen year after year to, I feel like it's training your holiday cactus to bloom on the holiday of your choice. So just remember, it takes about 6 weeks of the cool temps going back and forth of light and dark to get that bud set, and then out into the light for the Thanksgiving cactus, and about 8 weeks for the same for the Christmas cactus. These plants love to be pot bound. I will tell you now, I was given a Christmas, I'll call it a Christmas cactus, 38 years ago. And I've had it all those years until just a few years ago. And it loved to be pot bound. I can't emphasize enough. I say here, it needs to be repotted every 2 to 3 years, but I think 2 is pretty, you don't have to do it on 2 years, maybe 3 years, but it's the same thing. You want a new pot that's not much bigger than the old pot. And when you do repot, use a potting medium high in organic matter, but you might mix it with a succulent mixture, which is a bit coarser. It allows air and water to move through the soil, and the roots really do need good aeration. Cacti do not like to have soggy feet, wet feet. So you want to make sure that it drains well and you have good aeration for healthy root growth. Also, just to mention it, the pH of what's optimum for this is a 5.5 to a 6.2. So that means it's on the acidic side. Soils that's a bit more acidic that they will like. And guess what? Look at this. You can create your own, not create, but you can propagate your own holiday cactus. So it's easy to do. You just remove sections of the plant from 2 to 5 segments right at a joint and cut it off there. And then you allow that cut or pinched end to harden off, form a callus. It's like a callus on your finger, how that's a little thicker and a little hard. This can happen overnight. It just hardens. And then you fill your pot, whatever, with other rooting medium you want, water it, let it drain. Here's that drain thing, letting it drain, really good. And then just insert an end of the of the segment about 1 inch deep into the soil or potting medium, whatever you have. Put medium around them, water, let drain. And then about after being in a well-lit situation, you can check for roots about 6 to 8 weeks. And periodically check to see if it has enough water, but you'll have roots about an inch or so in about 8 weeks, and you then take that cutting and plant it in its own pot. So if you start doing that soon, you'll get plants, you'll have them all over your house. Let's put it that way. Or, hey, give them away to friends and family. Remember, it's an heirloom plant that will last a long time and will be deeply appreciated by the recipients. There are common problems. One that we talked about is the bud drop or the blossom drop. That's the temperatures being too high, abrupt change in temp. Insufficient light will do it. That drafts, lack of water. We talked about that. There can be shriveling or drooping. And I think that's something that we have to look at. These are cacti. It's easy to maybe overlook that they're a little bit on the dry side. Oh, suddenly it's shriveling. So what we do, we're good gardeners, we're good plant caregivers. And so we compensate by putting a lot of water on. Well, that's not helpful, because what happens is in that very excessively dry period, some of the roots have dried out, they're desiccated. They can't take up that extra water, the excess water that you put on. So the excess water causes what remaining roots there are possibly to rot. So if you have a plant that's underwatered, what you want to do, it's wilting, bring it back with small, but more frequent waterings, and not that deluge, because they can't take it. And sometimes the roots are lost and you may lose the plant. The other thing, if you look on the left side of your screen, overwatering, drops in temp at night, and low light can lead to edema. It's these blister-like bubbles on the foliage. These can burst, and they leave corky tissue behind, and that's not particularly attractive. So again, water the plants when the soil is dry, not desiccated, and don't overwater. Well, I didn't want to end the holiday cactus on a note of problems, so I say, cheer up. The holiday cacti are beautiful plants. They're easy to grow. They brighten a winter's day. You can pass them on to people. It's an heirloom gift. And even though I've talked about, I think once you get to know your plant, it's the Goldilocks. What's just right for that plant, and when to do it. And then you'll get, well, a plant that looks like this, which is fabulous. So unless I need to stop for any reason, Allison and Amy, I am going to go on to Amaryllis.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, thanks, Amy. This is the plant that I loved researching and talking about the most, because I happen to adore it. And apparently the word amaryllis very loosely translates into sparkling. So I call the amaryllis the sparkling star of winter. It is one of the most striking flowers to be in our homes. And for a long time, there was confusion over Amaryllis hippeastrum, those genus hippeastrum, genus amaryllis. But what we see are actually, what we get are actually hippeastrum, but they're all now commonly called Amaryllis. And they're native to the rainforest tropical areas of South America, in Brazil, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina. It's a tropical plant. And it was brought to Europe in the 1700s, into the United States in the mid 1800s. Certainly has been hybridized all over the place. There are 90 species in this genus, but most commercial hybrids that we see, that we get on the market, are derived from only 6 of those species. There's been huge breeding programs, began in 1799 in England, and now the breeders are mainly in the Netherlands, South Africa, the United States, Japan, and Israel. What do these guys look like? Well, you kind of know. Now, if you take your hand and hold it wide apart, wide apart, and I'm doing it. I know I'm not on camera, but I'm doing it. And so from the end of my little finger, my pinky, to the end of my thumb isn't even 10 inches. It's more like 8. But these exotic flowers, they're trumpet shaped, and they can range in width from 4 to 10 inches across and can be as long as 6 to 10 inches. They come in singles or doubles, and the colors, once again, the most popular, the most obvious is the red, the white, but they've been hybridized to be pink, salmon, apricot, rose, deep burgundy, bicolor, striped colors, and then having another color on the edge, like this last picture I showed you. I think that's a beautiful amaryllis. So they've been bred to be all kinds of beauty in our homes. And they do produce 3 to 4 blooms on 1 to 2 foot tall leafless stalks. And those stalks can grow concurrently or sequentially. My experience with them is that they grow sequentially. One flower stalk comes up, it blooms, and when those flowers are fading, the other flower stalk comes up and begins to bloom. The long, slender leaves actually don't come up until the stalks are up and the flower has begun to bloom, which is very interesting. The leaves themselves are gorgeous. They're 2 feet long, they're smooth, and they're glossy. So if you're looking for an amaryllis to be in your home or to give as a plant, a potted amaryllis, obviously make sure the plant's healthy. No sign of disease, pests, no yellow or broken leaves. They need to be upright and not drooping. My suggestion is buy one in the early stages of bloom, if it's for you, because you know it's going to bloom. It's going to be in your house. You're going to see it bloom. If you're giving it as a gift, maybe in the slightly starting to bloom, some flowers, or maybe the first stalk is in full bloom and you know that there's another stalk waiting in the wings to give to your family member or your friend, whoever you're giving it to. So in terms of having it in your home, you want a cool location. So this is more matching the Christmas or the holiday cactus, 65 degrees. Again, I always say this, keep out of direct sunlight because you don't want to fade those flowers. You want to prolong the flowers. And then when the top 2 inches, I think that's pretty far down, but when the top 2 inches of water, you can water, let it drain, put it in the sink, let it drain. And then you can fertilize these guys at half strength with an all-purpose fertilizer. And you want to keep it in a well-lit spot, again, out of sun. Those long leaves, they're promoting photosynthesis. Remember, this is a bulb. So the bulb needs energy. So keeping it in the light will give it that energy. And then when the blossoms are done, when they've faded and they look like this, you want to cut them off. You don't want any seed formation, but you don't want to remove the flower stalk itself until it's yellow, kind of like what we do outside with our daffodils or our tulips. You let that stalk get old, yellow, and then cut it about an inch above the bulb. You can keep the plant well watered. Again, the green leaves are promoting photosynthesis, and you can keep fertilizing at that point. Now, the whole idea here, the secret to keeping our amaryllis is to keep it actively growing after it's finished blooming. And this is what we want to do. So keeping it growing. Same thing as with the Christmas cactus. You can keep it in a brightly lit spot in your home, but you can also take it outside when all danger of frost, as I've said, has passed, maybe Memorial Day. And you want to put them in a spot where you can start in filtered shade, filtered sun, and then start moving them into the sun a little bit, because this is just the leaves now. No flower that's going to be faded to do. And you can put them in the ground. You can actually sink the pot in the ground. And the reason you do that, instead of unpotting it, burying it in the ground, digging it up in the fall and bringing it in, the roots are rather fragile or brittle, and you don't want to disturb the roots. So you can sink, if you want it to look like part of your landscape and not just a pot on a table or a bench, sink it into the ground. You can fertilize regularly. You're going to water regularly, obviously letting it drain. And then the magic thing in, I say, early September, before frost, when it gets cooler, you want to reduce watering and bring it inside. Now, as far as September, I would call it on Labor Day myself, just to be on the safe side. Because as my friend said, This is Colorado. It may snow. It may be hot. We just don't know. So we're going down a path now for reblooming by keeping it healthy and alive all summer. Now, unlike other bulbs, the amaryllis doesn't necessarily need a rest period per se. It does need, however, if you want to keep it actively growing and you want it to bloom at a certain time, you can set it up on your own timetable. You can control the bloom time by providing, oddly enough, here we are again, a period of rest for it to regenerate itself. And then you can time that around specific holidays if you so choose. So how are we going to do this? You want to store the pot in a dark place that's dry, like a basement, a cool closet above freezing, obviously, 50 to 60 degrees, and you store it there for about 8 to 12 weeks. The leaves, these wonderful long leaves, will die back, and you can cut them or remove them. They'll be shriveled and yellow. They tend to fall off themselves, but you can help them by cutting them. And you want to water only infrequently, just enough to keep the soil from being absolutely bone dry all the way to the bottom. And then after that, you want to bring it back out after this 8 to 12 weeks of what I'll call enforced dormancy. You can bring the plant back out into the light and resume watering. And if you do this in your 8 to 12 weeks, could be September, October. You bring them back out in late October. The flowers will begin from the dormancy. The stalk will come up and the flowers will come on in about 4 to 6 weeks. Hence, you will have it at your holiday time. And again, that's having it work on your timetable for a holiday situation. I happen to have a couple of amaryllis bulbs someone gave me 5 years ago. I have not done this, and it blooms when it wants to, and I'm happy about that. But I will make my self-confession right now. I went out and got an amaryllis bulb because I wanted to do this very thing, to grow my own, and then try this all out for next year. So this is with the plants. Now, one way to give an amaryllis as a gift is to give a bulb. I went out and got a bulb. And the thing that you can also buy are what they call box kits. They include the bulb, some soil, and pots. And the soil comes in like a cake that's desiccated, and you add water to that cake, and boom, bada boom, it turns into soil, which is great. Actually, you need to use a little more soil. They're very affordable. They're in box stores, they're at garden centers, they're maybe in grocery stores. I'm not real sure about that. But they're out there. And this is another way to bring an amaryllis to a friend. I did buy a couple of boxes for friends because I knew this was a good way to send them. If you're picking out a bulb itself, you want to choose the largest bulb possible that's in the bin, because the larger the bulb, the more flowers it's going to have. Some bulbs are as big as grapefruits. And so some of those larger bulbs do tend to be a little bit more expensive, but they're worth it because you get more flowers. You want that bulb to be firm, dry, no sign of mold, decay, injury. If you see a little bit of new growth on it, the one on the right-hand side, there's nothing growing. The bulb I got has a little bit of something coming out the top, and you want that to be a bright green. You want it to be healthy, but generally avoid bulbs that are sprouted out, like almost half grown a little bit. And I will tell you, the box that I bought, it did have that. I'm looking over at it now, and I've planted it, and I think it's going to be fine. But one that has started to grow in that way will have lost some of its quality. So you might want to go for a bare bulb and plant it. So what about planting? Well, you want it in a container only an inch larger in diameter than the widest part of the bulb, and twice as tall as the bulb, because you want good root growth in that pot. You can select a potting medium that's high in organic matter, but that drains well. You want holes in the bottom of your pot for drainage, obviously for good drainage. And you want to maybe fill it a halfway with your potting medium, whatever that is, and place the bulb on top of that with the roots. Add more soil, but you want the bulb to come up above the lip of the container. So maybe above the lip visually, but also 1/3 of the bulb showing, it remains visible. So it's not down underneath all the soil. Water it. You could set it in a sink to let it run through, obvious to drain, which is what you want to have happen. Let it drain completely, and then place it in a warm, sunny spot. The daytime temperatures can be 70 degrees, night at 60s for this plant that you're growing. You don't want to fertilize it. You don't want to fertilize a bulb. Let's put it this way. You don't want to fertilize a bulb because with no growth, the fertilization can kill the roots. You only fertilize once the growth appears on it. And then you can do it with a half-strength houseplant fertilizer. And again, if you want to promote more blooming, do it where the NPK, the P is a higher number, 5, 10, 5, something like that. It will produce a stalk in about 2 weeks, the bulb that you've planted, and it will bloom in about 6 to 8 weeks after you've planted it. So how do you want to care for it? Well, this will not surprise you. And now I'm talking about the one that you've grown and also the one that you've brought home, keeping it out of the direct sunlight, obviously, for prolonging the flowering, and also to reduce any fading. Keeping it at a cooler temperature, like 65 degrees, will also extend the bloom time. Now, your amaryllis may be top heavy. Remember I talked about those really large flowers, and some varieties are going to have larger flowers, some not. It depends what you get, depends what you buy. But you may need to stake the flower stalk. Now that could be a dowel that you put into the pot and just tie it up with string. You could see 2 here with dowels or rods just tied up with string. But there's actually amaryllis stakes that are sold at garden centers. They're sold probably in box stores too. And you just loop it around the stalk of the amaryllis and it will hold it upright. I think the other thing you want to think about, you want to always rotate your plant so it's not just always leaning or going towards the light. Amaryllis like to be repotted as well. They like being pot bound, but you can repot them every 3 to 4 years. And best time is after that dormancy that you've put it through. And selecting a pot just 1 inch larger. This is exactly the way you've potted your bulb that you've bought. Medium, high in organic matter, drains well. The pot has holes in it to drain. Fill it halfway, place your bulb on top, add soil, but leaving 1/3 of the bulb remaining visible. And then you want to water and let it drain out. Now, if none of this appeals to you and you still like amaryllis and you want an amaryllis and you want to give away an amaryllis, I have just the thing for you. No work amaryllis. Yay. This is a new craze that's come over from Europe, apparently. And what happens to the bulb is that the roots and the basal plate and the outer tunic are removed before the wax is applied. And a wire is actually inserted into the bulb to keep it upright because it no longer is stable on its roots. So it's no water. It's the wax is wax. There's nothing to water. There's no fertilizer needed. Everything's contained in that bulb. I was given one 2 years ago, and it's exactly what it says. You'll notice the flower stalks are a lot shorter, number one, but it was exactly that. The stalk came up, the leaves, it flowered, the leaves came up, and then it faded, and I cut it at the appropriate time. Oddly enough, I got more flowers after that, but really the bulb is depleted after all that. So this is unfortunately, the throwaway kind of amaryllis. So, but if all that other work too much, this is a perfect gift of an amaryllis to a friend or a family member, but it's not going to be an heirloom that you keep year after year after year. So unless there's questions that I can answer, I am going to move on to our last holiday plant, which is paper whites. Many of us have had experience with paper whites and we've decided, ew, we don't like how they smell. Well, I'll be talking about fragrance in just a second. Actually, they're fun plants. It's a narcissus. They're closely related to our spring blooming daffodils, but it's one of the few bulbs that doesn't require a chilling period. So we can force them in the winter indoors, and they're very adaptable. So they are part of the Tazeta division of Narcissus, of daffodils. There's 13 different classifications, and these are in that classification. And here's the piece of history that I personally think is fabulous. They originated in the Mediterranean region in Central Asia, but they were used as an element, as an item of commerce. So they were on the trade routes between Central Asia and China. And so during the late Sung period, about 1,000 years ago, they were brought to China from Arab traders. I love that. I love that history. They became very popular because the Chinese New Year is often in January, and they bloomed even in January. So they're associated with that particular holiday. And for us, the last 200 years, they're associated with our holidays and winter growth indoors. And they are easy to grow indoors. There's no chilling period, as I said. They're adaptable to be grown in soil, in water. And this, I think, is a great way to introduce children to gardening. I think of all the kindergarten and elementary school rooms that have paper whites to illustrate growing things, fun gardening. So paper whites are in the polyanthus group. It means many flowers, multiple blooms from 3 to 20 at the end of a 12 to 18-inch stalk. They're divided into 3 groups, bicolor, doubles, and whites, and they're star-shaped flowers. They don't have to be white, despite the name paper white. They can be yellow or orange. Well, what about that fragrance, that musky, paste-like, dirty socks, cat urine? People have used all kinds of descriptors. I think it's a love-hate situation, frankly. And what's interesting is the variety that's on the market is Ziva, and it was developed in the 1970s by an Israeli breeder. And it is the strongest, most odoriferous of the paper whites. And by the way, the name paper white comes from the papery feel of the petals as the flowers age. But let me just talk about fragrance for a second. Yes, there are heavily scented paper whites. Early Cheer is actually the one to the picture on the right there, clearly a yellow flower, but heavily scented. But there are paper whites with lighter scents, lighter fragrance, I should say. Inbal, Ariel, near Bethlehem. The Chinese sacred lily has a citrus smell to it, and the Grand Soleil d'Or has a fruity scent to it. I don't see them on the market. I think you can get them in catalogs. I think you can get them online. So if you like paper whites and you like the idea of growing these plants, these flowers in the winter, I would say get the one that smells well, that you like the smell. Again, buy top quality bulbs. They're firm, blemish free, no visible damage, no mold, no soft spots. You want that basal plate to be intact. Especially at the base, you don't want any basal rot. It creates decay that starts at the roots and spreads into the bulb, and then you'll get a dwarfed plant and flowers that are abnormal. Double nose bulbs often produce an extra stem of flowers, yay, yay. If you buy them, and by the way, here's another little thing. I went out and bought paper white bulbs, and they're right here growing next to me. I'm eager to see how it goes. And yes, they were the Ziva varieties because that's all I could find. But if you can't grow them right away, store them in a cool location with little light if you can't plant immediately. I will say this, they are living organisms, so get to planting them as soon as you can. They can be planted in soil, potting mix that drains well, once again, container 3 to 5 inches tall with drainage holes. You want to fill it halfway up, place the bulbs so that 1/3 of the bulb extends above the rim of the container. fill it in. They can be touching. Some people say, oh, an inch apart. I think it depends what kind of forest of paper whites you want in your container. So they can be nearly touching. Fill in and then water thoroughly and let drain. You want to keep them moist, but not soggy. They don't want wet feet. You can also, and this is the one I love, although I did plant mine in soil. Select a decorative container of some sort, 3 to 4 inches deep, and then you want to put 1 to 2 inches, maybe 2 inches of washed gravel, decorative stones, colored marbles that you have cleaned. You might want to put them in a 10% bleach solution, something like that, and then rinse them very, very carefully, making sure none of the bleach is in there. Put them in the bottom of the container. And then you place the bulbs on the stones or the gravel or the marbles, and then anchor them by heaping more stones or gravel around them to hold them in place. And then gently pour water in at the side so it comes up just below the bottom of the bulb, like almost a 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, right below the basal plate where the roots originate. You don't want to cover the bulb with water. That will lead to decay. So in terms of growth, once you do this, place the bulbs in a dark, cool place a couple of weeks. This encourages root growth. And then the roots will come, when the shoots are about 3 inches, you can bring them back into the sun and keep the bulbs in a sunny window, a sunny place at room temperature. The leaves come on quickly. The flower buds appear in about 3 weeks and open about 2 weeks later. So it's like a 6-week process to grow a bunch of paper whites. And again, as I say, you want to remove the plants from direct sunlight to prolong the blooming period. Warmer temperatures speed up growth, as you can imagine, and might create some legginess or flopping over. And here's where staking may be necessary. Tie them with a string, tie them with a decorative ribbon to match your holiday decor. There are wire staking holders. I don't know if you can see it on the right-hand side. It encircles the entire group of paper whites and are staked down into the pot. Obviously, you'd put that onto the pot before the paper whites get to be that large, keeping the soil moist or water at the base level of the plant. Now, here's something. I'm talking about flopping over. I'm glad you stayed on. Whoever stayed on this conversation, thank you so much, because this is so cool. Maybe we want paper whites, but we don't want them flopping all over the place. So there is a secret ingredient, and it is called alcohol. There are researchers at the Flower Bulb Research Program at Cornell University that discovered or researched how to keep the plants from growing as tall, but still having as many flowers and fragrance. So no problem. And you too can do it if this is something you want to try out. You add the water to the where you've put them, and then wait about 1 week. Roots are showing, you can see that. And then pour off the water and replace it with a solution of 4 to 6% alcohol made from what is called hard liquor. So I didn't do the math, they did the math. I'm glad they did. So to get a 5% solution from a 40% distilled spirit, could be gin, vodka, whiskey, rum, tequila, doesn't matter. You add 1 part of the alcohol to 7 parts of water, and you get an 8-fold dilution, which yields a 5% alcohol solution. So this is from the Cornell. You could see the research that they've done and how they discovered how much alcohol to be using to get a plant that is 1/3 shorter, even up to 1/2 shorter, and still getting the flowers that are fragrant and long lasting as usual. It will be nicely upright, but will not have stalks that fall over or bend at the waist. Cool research, Cornell, thank you. The paper whites will root in 3 weeks, bloom in about 6 weeks, as I said. And as I said earlier, if you want a continuous show or continuous fresh flowers blooming in your home throughout the winter, start new pots or new water-based potting every few weeks throughout the fall. The bulbs are not that expensive. You can keep investing in them because you cannot force these particular bulbs, the first ones, to grow again. They are depleted. They can't be forced again, and they're not winter hardy to be put outdoors. So just get new ones. If you want a show through the entire winter, they last best at 65. And as I said, just keep getting them. This is the holiday show. Brighten your home with holiday plants. I took my own advice. I went out and I got amaryllis and I got poinsettia and I got some paper whites, and I already have my holiday cactus. So they're perfect for your home. They're perfect as a gift for friends and family. If you want to look into this further, there's lots of resources for you here at through Extension, Colorado State University. We have a website. And if you go on that website, which you see at the top of the page, look for Yard and Garden, and you'll see you can go to fact sheets, garden notes, or Plant Talk. Well, fact sheets, it turns out there's one, 7.412. Plant Talk had 7 different sheets. Plant Talk are shorter than the fact sheet. Fact sheets can be a couple pages long. Plant Talk can be a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, a whole sheet on the topic of your choice. And speaking of the topic of your choice, you can do your own research. You put your topic, well, let's just say it's amaryllis, put the word Colorado and then put site:/edu. And you will then be led directly to all the research information, scientifically based information about amaryllis in Colorado. Now, if you take away the word Colorado and put your topic, amaryllis, site:/edu, you'll get information from extension services across the country. So you'll hear from Minnesota, yay, Ohio State, yay, Wisconsin, all good information. My caution on that is that you only use information from Zone 5 in which we live. So if you get information from Florida, and there is some, or North Carolina or Texas, there's a lot of information, it may not apply to our particular zone. If you want someone to talk to in terms of questions that you have, call us. You can email us at larimermg@gmail.com. And I say check out the Colorado Hort's blog. You can see the website right there. And these are our extension agents throughout the state giving good practical information and observations about many, many different topics, horticulturally speaking. So I am finished with this talk. Thank you very much for those of you who hung in there or stayed or wanted to hear about it. And I think the original agreement was that Amy and Allison, if you've had questions and put them in the chat, they have answered. So I'm going to stop the screen share right now, unless you need it up. Start my video.
Thank you, Susan. If you want to come back on, and there you are. Hey, that was, you're good. You can leave your slide up. That's totally fine. The resources are fantastic for our participants to review. And I just want to say thank you. There are a number of comments in the chat thanking you. And I like Vaughn's that she finally knows what kind of holiday cactus she has. So you solved a mystery for her, which is fantastic. There was a question from Bettina or Bettina. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but do you think the alcohol trick will work with amaryllis? And I have thoughts on that, but if you want to tackle that one, Susan.
I do not have thoughts on that. I really don't know. I really don't know. What do you think, Allison?
My guess would probably be not, because that's a plant you grow in media, not so much in just water. Like the beauty of paper whites is that they do really well without any sort of media around them. Right. So I don't, Amy, what do you think? I'm going to put you on the spot too. You could always try it, you know, after the holiday season, get some discount amaryllis and see if it works for you.
That was going to be my suggestion, Allison. Don't try it on your very prized plants, but you might as well try it on, you know, a cheap plant if you can. Just keep in mind the research was on the paper whites, right? So
right,
we don't know.
You know what I would be willing to do? I would actually be willing to get on Cornell's website somehow and ask them if they've done that research, because truly their group is called the, what did I say? It's called the Flowering Bulb Research Group program at Cornell. And if they've done it on paper whites, what other flower have they done it on? So I'd be willing to do that if you want to connect with me on that.
That's a great suggestion, Susan. And you have inspired people. I think we're in maybe the doldrums of the gardening season. And so having some cheer in our homes is a big deal. So just a lot of compliments and comments. So thank you, Susan. We appreciate all of you for joining us today. And we hope that you have a very happy holiday season. We will send out this recording to you. And again, Susan, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Do I just say goodbye? I stopped my screen share for